Here with us tonight. This is our fifth presentation in our Life and Legacy Planning series. I'm going to cover a couple of things here before we get started. Housekeeping is go out the double doors to your left, down the hall to the water fountain is where the restroom is. You also notice that every wall in the sanctuary has an emergency exit, not that we expect to use one, but find the one closest to you. Everybody should have received a back scratcher, shoehorn, pen when you came in. If you didn't, let us know, and we have somebody who can bring one to you. So we want to welcome everybody who's viewing online, and obviously everybody that's here in person, we're glad to see you. I'm Carrie Beckenhauer. I'm part of the Lasting Legacy group here at Aldersgate. So the format we have followed for our presentations is the speaker will speak for 30 to 40 minutes, and then there will be some time at the end, or maybe 45, depending on what she feels like. There will be some time at the end for question and answer. We have a microphone that we will bring around. Please use the microphone to ask your question, because that way the people who are viewing online can hear the question. So, tonight we have Julie Masters, PhD, is a professor of gerontology at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. She holds the distinguished Terry Haney Chair of Gerontology. As a department with a statewide mandate, Julie teaches courses in gerontology and death and dying on the UNL campus, something she has done since 2000. Julie works with students on independent research topics, honors theses, and doctoral studies related to end of life. In addition to teaching, Julie engages in research related to end of life planning, older adults and their sense of meaning, and the role of gerontology and geriatric programming in the United States. Julie is active in the community, serving on various advisory committees and boards, focused on aging adults, and is a frequent presenter on aging issues and end of life planning throughout Nebraska. Please join me in welcoming Julie Masters.
Isn't Carrie lovely? Let's give it up for Carrie. What a gift and pleasure and privilege to be in your company. I just need to say that out loud. I get to see people that I don't ordinarily see very often, and people that I admire and respect, who have worked in various capacities, whether it's caregiving or aging, and just how grateful I am. So thank you. And Carrie, your willingness to, when you said however long she wants to talk, and I thought, to those of you on Zoom, you can go to the restroom, we won't know, but for those of you here, if I just drone on, just feel free. So, to get up and go. All right. So I titled this, I'm Dead, Now What? Well, if you're saying I'm dead, now what? You are in a very different scene and spectrum. If you could maybe transfer some information to me, that would be great. Because if you could say I'm dead, now what? That's pretty powerful, isn't it? I say to my students, and by the way, I should tell you, I have the second best job in the world. I have been so fortunate to be able to be I've been teaching since 1988, and to be in the company of such beautiful souls. I just can't tell you what a gift it is. And while I'm an Omaha faculty member, I spend 100% of my time on the Lincoln campus. And I had a young man in my office shortly before I came over here, and had just taken his MCAT and was 98th percentile, and is so excited about palliative care. And I thought, I don't have to worry about the future. You right there are the future, and how exciting is this? So I just wanted to share that with you because I think sometimes we think, what's our future, you know? And we hear stories about young people, and yet the young people that I interact with are such beautiful, beautiful souls. So anyways, I needed to do that. So thank you to Carrie very much for your generous invitation, to each of you in the room for having the BHAG. And a BHAG is a big, hairy, audacious goal of learning about end-of-life planning. Not everybody wants to do it. Even my students say, I didn't want to do this when they created their death plan. But then by the end of the semester, they'll say, yeah, I'm glad I did it. So, but anyways, it's a BHAG because not everybody wants to talk about it. And I suspect some of you have approached your family, and for you Zoomers, I'm sorry, I'm a mover, so forgive me. All right. Some of you have probably tried to approach the conversation with your own family to say, this is what I'd want done or not want done. And maybe you've heard somebody say, oh, Mom, oh, Dad, you're not going to die, so we don't need to talk about this. Au contraire, mon ami, I am going to die, so we better talk about it. And I think the other thing, though, too, is just this recognition that all the people that we've loved that are no longer with us, they're still with us, just in a different way. So encouraging our loved ones to understand, yeah, we may be going away, and who knows where that away is. I mean, I'm in this beautiful, beautiful sanctuary, so you know where you're going. But I think for sometimes there's that fear of, now I'm going to have to let you go. So one of the things we're going to talk about is the ethical will, and that idea of how can you leave something for them that is more than just a CD, more than just real estate, more than just your great-great-grandmother's heirloom, but rather something that's more about your social capital, right? What matters most. And so I guess thanks to those, you know, who left too soon and those who wait for us in the beyond, because I think that, right? I should tell you that I got involved in this death and dying business, I think, honestly. I'm a gerontologist by training. And so I've been teaching about aging and the aging experience, and now that I'm over 60, it's like, oh, there you go. If you wait long enough. But it's also one of those things where I was not given the okay to teach death and dying until my own mother died in 1992. And it was as if the department chair, Jim Thorson at the time, felt like now I had the street cred, that I could talk about dying and death in a way with people who might be sitting in the class who had experienced loss. You know, it's one thing to have a 5 and 6 football season, and that's a lot of loss, right? It won't happen ever again. But it's I'm confident. But it's another thing when you have this 1 degree of separation and this person that you love so much, it's gone, and gone quickly. And how do you process that? I should tell you, it was 33 years on Friday that my mother has been gone, and now she's been gone longer than I've been alive. And it's one of those things of, what I mean by that is the length of time. And it's one of those things of, okay, how do I take that experience and share it with all of you? I heard somebody say this one time, actually it's Tom Attig. He's a grief researcher, and he wrote the book, The Heart of Grief. If you're ever looking for a beautiful book, that would be a book I'd suggest, The Heart of Grief. I don't get kickbacks, I don't get royalties. It's just a beautiful book because each chapter might only be a couple of pages. And for those of you that have experienced grief, you know, sometimes you can only read a couple of pages at a time. To expect yourself to read War and Peace after you've experienced the death of someone you love is naive. It just doesn't work that way. But what Tom said was that each time he walks in the room, everyone that he has loved that is no longer with him accompanies him through that door. And I tell that to the students. Each time I walk in the room, my mom, my dad, my brother, my college roommate, my grandparents, all the people that I loved, they still are there. Not in the physical sense, because there'd be no room left in the classroom, but in the sense of they shape who we are. And so when we think about, in terms of making our own plans and arrangements, it was because my mother had prearranged everything, because she probably figured we couldn't figure out how to do it. That's my suspicion. She didn't say it, but that's my suspicion. And it was one of those things, such as the prayer card she picked out. Never in a million years would we have thought to go with that one. Or the urn that she picked out, or all sorts of things. So, in a way, she came in this door with me tonight to be with you. So, I have to kind of give a shout out to Sister Canabero, who was from Brazil. She was the oldest living woman in the world, and she died last week. Requiescat in pace. So, rest in peace to Sister. Having lived to be 116 years of age. That's pretty good. There's only 5 people that were pre-Sister, 115 years of age and older, super centenarians. She died. So this idea of requiescat in pace, we've all seen R.I.P. or rest in peace. If you go to Michael's around Halloween, you'll see all these little decorations you can have for the yard, the tombstone with R.I.P. But requiescat in pace is a prayer. It is words of prayer, words of significance. And so when we think about it from that vantage point, it kind of puts it into a different perspective, doesn't it? It's not just a little few letters on a tombstone at Michael's, which is a lovely store, but it's more of, we're praying for this person. And however we pray, we're praying. Now, this gal, Ethel was probably saying, listen, sister, you've had your day in the sun. It's time for you to move on. So now Ethel is the oldest living person in the world. That was the joke. Was it funny? I didn't think so. Okay. But I just imagine Ethel, come on, sister, I don't have that much time. All right. So Thomas Long and Thomas Lynch. Thomas Long is a pastor, Thomas Lynch, a mortician, and they wrote the book together, The Good Funeral, Death, Grief, and the Community of Care. And what they say is what makes a funeral one of a kind is the irreplaceable person who is dead and people to whom the death matters most. And the funeral has the ability to get the living and the dead through the maze of changing statuses. So moving from wife to widow, husband to widower, to child to orphan, right? That's a change in status. It's interesting, and as I peruse the death announcements, and it's just, I think it's partly age and partly because I teach death and dying, right? I'm interested, who are these people? And I'm increasingly seeing more people say no services. And yet, I get why you might say no services, but it isn't just about you. Right? I say that with love in my heart, but maybe there is somebody that wants to come in. Maybe there is somebody that wants to pay their respects. Maybe how many of you know the Golden Girls? Do you remember the episode where the neighbor that everybody hated and the lady comes in and kicks the coffin? Maybe that's what needs to happen. So, what should be said at a funeral? The slogan, funerals are for the living, is commonplace but mistaken. Funerals are not primarily about you unless you're willing to trade places with the corpse. Think about that. That is why funerals should interrupt people's schedules. They're for the repose of the deceased, not for the convenience of those left behind. Kind of gotten away from this idea of the obligation to be present, the obligation to pay our respects. So Tisdale talked about this idea of advice, and it's a wonderful book, Advice for Future Corpses, A Practical Perspective on Death and Dying. And she says we make a death plan because we can. We make a death plan because we can, for our own peace of mind, and as an act of compassion for the people nearest to us who will be life, quite literally, holding things. So this idea of, we might think, well, maybe, I remember somebody said to me one time, I think that's very narcissistic to create a death plan. I think that's incredibly narcissistic. And then I think about people who have experienced the loss of someone that they love, that they don't even know how to put one foot in front of the other. What would mom would have wanted? What would dad would have wanted? And the bickering that happens. Oh, dad wanted earth burial. No, mom wanted or dad wanted cremation, right? And so, helping to balance that and to put that out there can be useful. Now, that doesn't mean it isn't open to change, so you better be prepared for that. But it's also that idea of, let's give some guidance, let's give some suggestions. So I want to talk about the elements of a death plan and to encourage you to think about some of the aspects or the pieces. And I've been teaching death and dying for what I think is I tell my students at least 100 years, but let's say 30 years plus. And the point of that, though, being able to teach for that long, is to see how, it ebbs and flows, but to see how they respond. In fact, today our class was about, what did you like about your death plan? And so everyone had the chance to offer their thoughts. And more than one, and I would say probably a fourth of the students said that the best part was the ethical will. And we'll talk more about that. But then the advance directive. And Carrie, what you're doing here is so important, getting people to think about their advance directives, getting people to think about their wills and so forth. Because when business is unfinished, it's really unfinished. And particularly from the practical side of the financial piece, getting that straightened out makes a lot of sense. So thank you for what you're doing. So the will, which is a secular document, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Funeral or memorial service, what do you want? What's really beautiful about your congregation, and I looked up in terms of the United Methodist Church and the standard of practice and how services should be conducted and the importance of that. You have a little wiggle room, though, in terms of what you can add. I don't think they'll shoot your cremains up into space, off the back parking lot, but there could be some other options to think about. So things like memorial cards and prayer cards. Your obituary or death announcement, your obituary is the story of your life. Who are you? Right? You're just not taking up space in this wonderful chair. Who are you? And that's what that does. And then the tombstone, what do you want on your marker? What should it say? What should be that exclamation point? And then price list and cause of death. I have the students do a cause of death just because I want to keep it light. And then they ask their friends, well, what do you think I should die from? Oh my gosh. And some of the things, honestly, and maybe it's selfish on my part because after I've read all these plans, I start to get a little sleepy. And then I read about somebody and I think, this child has been quiet all semester long, and then all of a sudden they become this, almost this amazing comedian in terms of their writing. But just to, again, it's an academic exercise, but it's to get them comfortable. Because many of the students go off to become doctors and nurses and lawyers and all sorts of things where they're going to have very uncomfortable conversations. But by the way, all of us are going to have uncomfortable conversations. We have to get our hands in the soil. It's going to be messy, but it's also going to produce something very lovely in the end. So the ethical will comes out of the Judaic tradition. And there was a time where people did not have money or property or things that they could give their family. But what they could give was their social capital, what mattered most to them, right? The significance, the things, the values in their life, being honest, making sure that you're fair with people, all sorts of things where they could write about, again, what mattered most to them. And so with the ethical will, if you take it now to the 21st century, how can it be written? It can be written a lot of ways. It can be written in paragraph form, where you just start, it's a William James stream of consciousness. My ethical will right now is 6 pages long. Too long for anybody to care, but it's that idea of what really matters. You know, and I'm touched by, when I read the ethical wills of the students, things that matter, family. You have no idea how important family is. They may not say that to you out loud, but family and their faith, right? How important faith is, and their friends. And it's that idea of what really matters to you. So you can do it as paragraphs, or you can write letters. I had a woman, an adult woman, who when she came to the course, and it was probably 20 some odd years ago, she had 3 children, and one child died by suicide, and she wrote a letter to each one of her children, including the child who had died. And for her, the therapeutic nature of that had value. You know, the things that we want to say to people, and sometimes we think, oh, they just know, you know, good, strong stock. Oh, they know I love them. Do they? The ethical will allows for that. You know, sometimes people will also include things like poetry or photographs, or maybe it's a recipe that you've not wanted to share, to say, well, someday I'll let you know what the pumpkin pie recipe is that I bring on Thanksgiving, and then you give directions to go to Russ's, to the frozen foods section. And they're like, are you kidding me? Grandma, it's been a Mrs. Smith's this entire time? You know what? I'm all about if it's good, why not, right? But things where it allows people to share what's in their heart. And especially after death has happened, to be able to read something like that can be extraordinarily powerful. Because they may read it right after, but 6 months, a year, 18 months, that's when it would matter. Sometimes people will, again, like I said, discuss family. Sometimes they just discuss the things that have helped to shape who they are. But again, that chance to express yourself. The advance directive. I know you're going to talk about it. I just wanted to mention it. So if you're creating a death plan, it would be good to include something like that. In terms of my advance directive, here it is, sharing it with the people that are making decisions for you. Sometimes we think our families are mind readers, and they know exactly what we'd want done. That's not the case. You know, there's documents such as the 5 wishes that can be very helpful, because it really goes into detail, and I may have brought a copy. It goes into detail about not just do I want to be intubated, not just do I want to be resuscitated, but for heaven's sakes, I want my teeth brushed twice a day. And that seems that you think, well, of course that's going to happen. If you're in a nursing home, I'll let you decide. Or maybe I want nice music playing, but not the nice music you like, it's the music I like. Or maybe I want a window open with the fresh air coming through, and even if it's the winter, let me smell the fresh air. Things such as, again, there are living wills, which are a static document. The durable power of attorney for health care is when you've designated somebody, someone who can speak on your behalf, someone who could say, I think that's a good idea, or no, I don't think that's what they would want. You know what's interesting in our end-of-life research is we've discovered, and this is why it's important for you to think about this, where spouses, particularly husbands, will say, I want you to do everything possible to keep this person alive. When maybe their wives are saying, I was ready to go a week ago, right? But I get why, for the spouses, why they want to do everything possible. But if you've not had that conversation, and then people are thinking, well, what do I do, right? So when you have that conversation, you know, I know people have talked a lot about things like Pulse, and if you go out to the Pulse website, it's pretty interesting because who needs a Pulse? It's someone who's seriously ill or frail, someone who might be at imminent risk, someone who you wouldn't be surprised if they would die in the next 6 months or a year. But for people that are healthy, people like ourselves, something like that is something for later. Having that advance directive, the durable power of attorney for healthcare, having someone who can speak on your behalf, having two people is pretty important. Not just pretty, it is important. Okay, will. How many of you have so much stuff that when your family comes into the house, they think, they just envision, and it's not that they don't love you, they think, what are we going to do with this? Probably not. You all are very organized people. You probably have dispersed all your possessions. You strike me as very organized, and I bet everything's, yeah, right? There are a few of us in the world, probably the people on Zoom, there are a few of us in the world where we have too much, right? We have too much. So this question of where will your stuff go? By the way, even if you don't have a lot of stuff, where will your stuff go? You know, you think about your great-grandmother's china and crystal and how beautiful it was. And even if it's jelly jars, those were the jars that we used. Oh, I don't, and then you hear somebody say, oh, I don't want those. What do you mean you don't want those? That's kind of like an intelligence test. Now we know about it. Look at that person with a little more suspicion, right? But asking yourself, okay, they don't want it. Where can it go? And thinking about charities. And I bet many of you have already done this. But if you haven't, at least take the time to think about it. What charities would you like things to go to? Are there people that you think would enjoy whatever it is that you have? And the beauty about aging, and now I say this after 60, you just after a while, I don't care. You know, you're just ready to it's time to go. It's good. Kind of like the kids. It's good. It's good. You know, I think the thing, and Carrie, with what you've been doing with the programming, having somebody who understands wills, having somebody who understands trust. I'm not, you know, I can't speak as an attorney, so, you know, I can only speak so far, but it's somebody who can help you get things organized, right? And how important that is. You know, but also to think about things, not just your physical possessions, but your digital possessions. And we all have these digital, I said to the students today, you all have these digital breadcrumbs all over the place. You're on Instagram, you're on TikTok, you used to be on Facebook, they're not there anymore. You used to be on MySpace, and then they look at me with just this blank stare, exactly. Or I say newspapers or shopping malls, blank stare. Like, I've never heard of those. Unfortunately, nobody else has. That's why they're no longer there. But it's this idea of, you know, what are you going to do with things like your email account and other things? So really processing that, thinking about how you can get that organized and dispersed. The other thing is, what about if you have a dog or a cat or other creatures? Who's going to take care of them? How do you make sure that they're cared for? And are you going to give them to a family member who you know will love them? Do you have a friend who would love your animals the way you do? Those are things we need to think about and put into perspective. All right. The other thing I thought was interesting as I was doing research for this is, how many of you are writers? Like to write? Okay. Some of you like to write, or maybe photography and other things. So those are all gifts. Do you want people to see those after you die? And so, what do you want? Do you want them to be burned? Do you want that? So it's things like that to think about. And having, you know, some people journal every day. If I put on paper some of the thoughts that go through my head, It would not be good. So it's a question of who do you want to take care of that for you, right? So something to consider, something to contemplate. And if anything, if you have had the experience of cleaning out a home of somebody, you do appreciate all the things. Has anybody ever done that? The look on your face it speaks volumes, right? So it's the idea of, okay, what can I start doing? Maybe there's some things it is okay to toss or recycle or other things. 50 years of National Geographic, and by the way, those are beautiful magazines. 50 years of National Geographic, that's a lot of magazines. And who will take them? Do libraries? I don't know. So it's good to start asking those questions now. So let's talk about the funeral or the memorial service, and that's really the meat and potatoes of it all. This is this experience, this is this service that can make all the difference. So disposition practices. By the way, that's a real coffin. It's a crime scene coffin that is available for purchase. So if you want to get the attention of your family. Anyways, I bet the Zoomers are looking that up right now. So what are the two purposes of a funeral? One is ritual, right? That idea of remembering the person, remembering them either in a humanistic way or in a religious way, in a spiritual way. And then the practical is the disposal of the body. You have to do something with it. By the way, cremation is considered to be final disposition, whereas if you still have the body intact, it's not been cremated or russimated or things of that sort, it does need to be buried. You have a wake, a visitation, for some traditions, a rosary. There's the funeral where the body is present, and the memorial service, the body is not present. Time and again, you'll see, oh, we're going to the funeral, and there's an urn in the front. A memorial service means there is no body. Committal service is the service that happens after a funeral or a memorial. So it may happen immediately following, it may happen the next day, but you've had something before the actual committal, or interment or inurnment. A graveside service is just that. There's no other service aside from what happens at the cemetery. It's good for you to know this, that sometimes people may not make the connection. Some cemeteries, particularly newer cemeteries, will require a vault or a grave liner, and that is additional. I don't know, some people say, well, let's get this beautiful casket, and by the way, there's a vault that will accompany it for another $10,000, or you could just go and get a nice grave liner that no one's going to see anyways. So just thinking about it from a practical standpoint. So the methods of body disposition, things such as interment, which is the burial. You've heard of disinterment, right? Disinterment of the body. Interment is burial. Inurnment is the burial of the urn. Sometimes you'll hear inhumation, and what that simply means is the burial of the body. Most burials from a global standpoint, most deaths have been ground burials or earth burials. Places such as the United States, though, are changing, where you're seeing more of cremation. And we'll talk more about that. There's water burial, which is burial at sea, where you'd have your cremains and they would be placed in the water. You could bequeath your body to a medical school. How many of you have thought about that? Okay. Do you have the paperwork done? Yeah. Okay, you do. If you want to do that, that's in order for them to take your body, you need to do the paperwork in advance and get that on file. And even if you do that, they may not take you. That's nothing. They may have a lot of bodies that week. You might try dental schools, you might try other places. So if that particular medical school is not accepting, of course you won't be able to do that. Your family will have to do that, but finding another place that would be willing to accept your body. Air burial, that's not something that you're seeing happening in the United States, but places such as Tibet, where Buddha gave his body. They also have air burial there. I won't go into detail, and you'll be grateful. Cannibalism, prehistoric times, that's not something that you'll see promoted locally, nationally, or globally. Fire or cremation, which 1874 is when it first was established, but it's really, do I dare say, it's really heated up in the last couple of decades. You are welcome, in the last couple of decades. And then recimation, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's the use of alkaline hydrolysis in really hot water. And there are a number of states that offer recimation, and Mayo Clinic is one of the places where it's most familiar. And what it is instead of using fire to consume the body, it's the alkaline hydrolysis in the really hot water. In either case, though, you don't completely disintegrate the body. When you have things like cremains, your cremains are actually bone that has been pulverized. So whether, that isn't very gentle to say, is it? But whether you are cremated or recimated, they will take, it's generally your long bones, your heavier bones, that they will take and they'll put it through a pulverizer, and that's what the cremains are that you receive, not like what you would get the ash in a fireplace. There's also a popular movement, not in this state, but in a number of others, Washington, Colorado, and so forth, where now body composting is made available. So if you are of the persuasion where you want your body composted and returned to the earth, you're going to have to go to another state where it's legal, right? You can't do things that aren't legal. Green burial, how many of you have heard of that or thought that might be? Okay, so green burial is something, while there's not a green cemetery in Nebraska, there are similar ways to bury in a green fashion. Not pure in the sense of the green cemetery, but we'll talk a little bit about that. But a green burial is burial without a vault or an outer grave liner. And it also does not include a casket or a coffin. There's no embalming of the body, and the burial tends to be quickly. So you'll have a direct burial without any visitation, without any cosmetizing or preparation of the body that you would see if you were to go to a local mortuary for a visitation to see the body. The idea behind a green burial is to, every effort is made not to disturb or disrupt the earth, as minimal as possible, and then also to replenish. So you bury the body in a container that's biodegradable, and then you would plant trees or shrubs or other things, again, to give back. By the way, how many of you have ever seen the urns that the idea that you'll plant a seed in the urn and then a tree grows? It's supposed to be, your cremains have no value from a nutrient standpoint. It's a good marketing idea because you remembered it, but the idea is your cremains will not replenish the soil. The VA has just established, as I was doing research, they've just established 3 cemeteries where you could have a green burial, not in Nebraska, but there's that movement in that direction. And then, so Nebraska is a place, excuse me for a moment, pardon me. Nebraska is a place where, while there's not a green cemetery, if I'm of the Jewish faith, the Jewish tradition, I'm buried without embalming. My body might be placed in a shroud. If I'm of the Islamic tradition, if I'm Muslim, then I would be buried. Again, it would be an immediate burial. I might be in a shroud. I may or may not be in a coffin or a casket. I will have some sort of dome over my body so the ground doesn't sink. That's pretty close, right? So with green burial, the idea we don't want to add chemicals to the earth, you could do that and take that approach. If I'm of the Jewish faith and I'm in a Jewish coffin or casket, they will drill holes in the bottom of the coffin to allow the earth, right, to allow the air and other things so that the person can naturally decompose. The VA has, through their National Cemetery Administration, provides support for people that are veterans. And so if you are a veteran, it's good to learn whether or not you would qualify for those benefits. Now, we're going to do some fun things here. There is something that's called the mushroom burial suit, and I couldn't resist. He really is a fun guy. And it's this idea of this suit where mushroom spores, eventually your body's supposed to break down and decompose. I could not find anything, though, to help explain the degrading of bone, because things like teeth and so forth, and that's why if someone has died, a dentist becomes invaluable, because the teeth they don't degrade like everything else does. This is the resomation, aquamation, or green cremation machine. You can see it's a tube or a chamber where the body is placed, and then the alkaline hydrolysis and the hot water combined will basically disintegrate the soft tissue, the skin, the hair, and everything, leaving only larger pieces of bone. Now, for people who really believe in this idea of immortality, some people opt for cryonics, so to be cryonically suspended, and basically you're suspended in liquid nitrogen. You have died. There was a woman from, it wasn't Ethel, there was a woman from the UK that wanted to be cryonically suspended before she was officially dead, and they said, no, we can't do it that way. You gotta be dead in order to make that happen. Thanks for remembering the Ethel joke. See, it all ties together. But the idea behind cryonics is that because of scientific advances in stem cell technology, that a person can be resurrected. Their body, sometimes it's the whole body or just the head, and then the rest of your body would be filled in with other technology. Cremation, some people do opt for cremation, and with cremation, it could be fireworks. You could have shotgun shells filled with your cremains. You could be woven into a vinyl record. You could be mixed into tattoo ink, and someone could wear you that way. You could be made into diamonds. Life Gem is an example. You could be carried off to space. You could become pencil lead, or you could just go into an urn. Why not? Don't break the mold. Just go into an urn. But there's a lot of things that can be done. As far as methods of disposition or dispersal, if I were in front of you in 1950, I'd say, you're going to have a visitation the night before. Excuse me. You're going to have a visitation, pardon me, Zoom. You're going to have a visitation the night before. You will have been cosmetized and embalmed, and people will come see you that night. The next day there will be a funeral. Then they'll take your casket to the cemetery and you'll be buried. That's no longer the way. I mean, there are so many different ways. Do I dare say that you can be sliced and diced? So, in a complimentary way. So you could have your burial first, and then you could have a memorial service, and then you could have the luncheon. You could do that. Or you could have, so that'd be a direct burial. Or you could be cremated first, and then have the memorial, then the luncheon. Or you could have the traditional wake, visitation, funeral, or memorial service and burial. There's so many different ways that it can be done. Nothing prevents you from doing things today as maybe it did in the past. But I think the beauty of your congregation is visiting with your pastor and others in terms of what's allowed and not. This, I don't know if you can see this or not, but I got this in my email, and about Costco selling caskets, and all I could think of was, because I bought tires last year and I got a nice rebate, and I thought to myself, imagine the rebate with a casket. So getting down to business, what will you take with you in terms of your burial? I'm going longer than 45 in terms of my comments. Is that okay, Carrie? Okay, thank you. The mistake is you gave me this and this. All right. So what will you take with you? You know, the ancient Greeks would take and place things in people's graves with the idea that it would help them on their journey. And we still do that today in some respects. Sometimes we leave photographs, or we leave flowers, or we might put in a prayer book. Some people will put in golf balls. Other people will put in shotgun shells, or cigarettes, or liquor, or things of that sort. But it's that idea of, what would you want in there? And maybe what wouldn't you want in there, to say, don't even think about that. Of course, the child that you have in your life who likes to kind of break the mold might be that person, so keep an eye on him. Clothing, you know, what will you wear? Do you trust your family, by the way, to pick out your outfit? Because that, you might be disappointed. Look down, think if that's what happens, you look down and think, that would not be that. I wouldn't be caught dead in that outfit. Musical tributes, what kind of music do you want played? You know, there's some religious traditions that would not allow secular music to be played in a place of worship. I'm not sure about your particular congregation, but that's a conversation with your minister. So popular music, things like You Raise Me Up, It's Well With My Soul, Amazing Grace, Ancient Words, You Can Close Your Eyes, which, yeah, if you're looking in the casket, you want to say, you can close your eyes now. Sorry. I thought that was pretty funny, didn't you? Okay. This is very difficult to read, but this is out of your book of worship, and you have these amazing guidelines in terms of how, within the Methodist tradition, of how services can be arranged. You have resources you can turn to look for in terms of service of death and resurrection. You know, organization is key. I'll have students, when they create their death plans, they talk about it, but nobody's in charge. You know, they have this visitation, nobody's in charge. They have a funeral, nobody's in charge. And I always say to them, but who's going to lead this? It doesn't happen there isn't like somebody throws up magical dust and then all of a sudden it happens. You know, a good funeral or a good memorial service is so well planned. It's like a good meal. It's so well planned. You have to ask yourself, who's going to be in charge? Is it the minister? Is it an officiant? Is it the funeral director? What do you want them to know about you? Have you ever been to a service and you thought to yourself, I don't think this person knew my loved one? Because if they knew them, this is not what they would say, right? So when we can help inform, is there someone in your family, friend circle, that can speak on your behalf? Some other things such as pallbearers. Who would you want to serve in that capacity? Honorary pallbearers. If you're cremated, you only need one pallbearer. But if they're carrying a casket, I don't know if you saw Pope Francis's funeral, I thought that it truly did, because it was zinc lined. It must have weighed a ton. Those guys, though, they had good poker faces, because I thought, I'd be in tears. Like, can't we put him down for a minute? God rest his soul. But I mean, that was a pretty heavy coffin. Allowing family members to participate, whether it's doing the readings, taking up the gifts, maybe throwing dirt into the grave. There's so many ways your family can be involved. Visual materials such as films, stories, photos. You know, you might want to go through a stack of photos, and the ones that you thought, this is not what people should see in a public setting, go ahead and run those through the shredder. That could be my idea. Printed programs, it might contain a eulogy, it might not, but you need to think about that. Memorial cards, what would you want? Let me share with you. So Canva has a template where you can create a memorial card, but maybe, do you have a favorite scripture? Do you have something, that I think about Susie, and it's joy, it's just your word, right? And I could just see that, joy. That's all that would need to be, and it would tell a story. So what are the words that you'd want with your card? Is there a photograph of you that you would like? What about a picture of nature? I mean, there could be a lot of things you could include. Eulogy or witnesses, somebody who can speak on your behalf, somebody who can talk less than 45 minutes, about 5 minutes in length, maybe 10 minutes maximum. It's about being honest about this person, not lying, because the people that are in the congregation will know you're not telling the truth. But it's also, everybody has a good side. Criminals have a code. Even criminals know what's good and not so good. So everybody has a good side, and what is it? So when it comes time to eulogy or witness, who do you want to do that? And maybe ask them to write something up. And maybe if you're too formal, and being too formal is never out of favor. Maybe somebody else in the family that's a little bolder could say, hey, you know what, before this happens, could we take a peek at that eulogy? I bet you have somebody in your family like that. Make sure you read it in advance so that somebody isn't thrown off to find out, what do you mean he had another family in a different state? This is new news. We did not know this. I often think about Sophia from the Golden Girls. What would she say? She really had no inhibitions. She would say it like it was. But then Rose, they're checking their watch. Even you are now. Okay, so the actual services, things such as service of death and resurrection. What I would say to you is like etiquette, and etiquette really is wonderful because it gives structure. Within your tradition, you have structure. And looking to that structure to provide you guidance. There's another slide that nobody can see. You'll have to trust me that it's in your book of worship. What do you want on your marker or your headstone? What do you want it to say? Now, Whitney Houston, she had, she didn't do that, somebody did it for her, I will always love you. But you have a signature. Again, Susie, joy. One thing I do want to mention, because I think this is important, is the idea of priceless. Anytime you walk into a mortuary, they are required by the Federal Trade Commission to provide you with a price list. Every time. Now, if you've gone, go in at 8 and then come back at 10, they might say, don't you still have that price list from 8 a.m.? But every mortuary, at least once, is required to provide you with a price list. And in part to make sure that you're not taken advantage of. The other thing is, if you have a family member who is from Lincoln and you want the service to happen in Lincoln, but they died in California, deal with the mortuary in Lincoln to make the arrangements. When you're dealing with 2 different mortuaries, now you're paying retail for 2 different mortuaries. So deal with the mortuary, the receiving mortuary, if it's in Lincoln or wherever, have them work with the other mortuary. Because the thing is, you have a relationship with the people here. You have to look eye to eye at Super Saver. You don't have to look eye to eye with the mortuary in California. Okay. So I think, okay, that's all right. Because I've gone too long, there is a project, but we'll make sure you get one of these. There is a project that Candy Chang started, and it's called Before I Die. And what she did is she started in New Orleans, and it's been a global phenomenon, where she has taken walls and used the chalkboard paint and then stenciled in, before I die, I want to, and then people fill it in. So in some cases, they might say, I want to sail, right? I want to sail the world, or I want to learn how to weld, or I want to tell my family I love them, and things of that sort. And as a way to conclude this experience, and Carrie's going to provide you the little slip of paper, but think about that, ponder, before you die, what would you want to do? And it's one of those things where, even though we've talked about death and dying, we're really talking about life and living. Because, you know, these two amazing experiences, when you came into the world and how great that was, and when you leave the world, how sad that will be for everybody else, not for you. You're just like, so long. It's everything. It's all about the inside, the middle that matters. So we're going to open it up to questions because I've gone longer than 45 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to start with the first question. And Professor, I sat through this class many years ago, and you talked about a student that you had. I hope you'll tell that story a little bit. He was going to go to dental school.
Right,
and
Colin.
he'd gone through
Colin Hayes.
So please, if you could relate.
Sure. So Colin Hayes was a young man. He was one of those students who was quiet as a church mouse before all semester, and then I read his death plan, and it is hilarious. And all I can think of is, why didn't you talk during the course of the semester? And then I happened to, a student the fall, so he was spring, he had asked, Colin had asked me to write him a letter of recommendation, which I did, and then I got a lovely thank you note, and that's the last I heard from him. Then in the fall, I had a student show me an article from the Daily Nebraskan about this young man who had been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and they were doing bone marrow donations and so forth. Well, he was scheduled to go to dental school, and then with his diagnosis, he ended up, they were not able to cure the acute myeloid leukemia, and he ended up dying. And when I read this story, the natural thing for us to do as a class was for the students to all sign cards for his mom. And so we signed the cards, and then I wrote her a letter. Just, you know, as a teacher, sometimes I do want to say to find their parents to say, do you know how wonderful your child is? Well, unfortunately, I was able to do that, but not under the best of circumstances. And she got back in touch with me and shared the story that his death plan was what he called his book, and that his ethical will was read at his service. The marker that he had designed is what's in the Beatrice Cemetery. He had given away golf balls with GBR on them, like any good Husker. But it was one of those things where it allowed his family to know what he wanted to do. And I think about Colin. I also think about his mom, who she also ended up dying within that year. So his sisters really took a lot of hits. The loss of their brother and the loss of their mom. She was a beautiful soul too, and I think about her a lot. So.
Thank you for relating that. I mean, it's not something that we expect. When you're a professor and you're with 20, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, that they're going to leave us so early. But this case, it was critical. His mom and sisters knew exactly what he wanted to have done. Okay, questions? Who would like to have the microphone? Got to have some kind of question here.
Or complaint, criticism. I'm okay with those too.
Not a complaint, but in many life experiences, like there are wedding planners.
Right.
Is there an occupation of a death planner?
Well, you could say, a good mortician would say, this is what I do for a living. But there are people that have the title of a death doula that not only help people as they're approaching the end of life, but helping them think about those things. And I would, I would guess you'll probably see more people like that as we move away from the visitation, funeral, burial to cremation, the fireworks display and other things. Somebody's got to organize it. That's a great question. Thank you.
I just want to make a comment about your telling people if you're in Lincoln and somebody's in California, make the arrangements here. My mother was in California. She was from Red Oak, Iowa. And all the arrangements were made in Red Oak, and they took care of getting the body from California back to Red Oak. And so only one mortuary was involved in it.
Thank you. And because they would do trade work, thank you so much. And my condolences for the loss of your mom, especially with Mother's Day coming up. You know, it's, if I'm dealing with California independently, they're going to charge me California prices. So how smart you all were. So thank you, sir.
Is there an outline that you can give out that you use with your class, or?
Do you know what? I could put together something, if you'd be interested, I could put something together and then provide it to Carrie, and then she could share with you if you'd like it. Or you could, I don't know if you, or you could send me an email, but it might be easier if I just provide that to Carrie.
And this is being recorded, so if you want to talk with your sister, your cousin, your brother-in-law, one of your children, they can get on to our YouTube channel for Aldersgate, and they can view this presentation next week, next month, next year.
So would that fulfill your request?
You mean the video?
Yeah. Or would you'd like the handout?
What do you do with your class?
So I have a funeral, or I call it a death plan worksheet. And we get as granular as what cemetery, what mortuary, to what kind of music, what kind of scripture, who's going to, even though I say who's going to lead the service, somehow that just gets overlooked. And I mean no disrespect to them. But anyway, so I've got all those details. I would want to prepare something a little different for you all that you could use. Okay, I'd be happy to do that for you. I've got to get 2 exams written, so I won't get it done tomorrow. Okay.
Other questions for the professor tonight?
Or anybody on Zoom? Oh, they probably said, 45 minutes, my foot, click.
Okay, if we have no more questions, please join me in thanking Professor Julie Masters for being with us tonight. And I want to mention that we have our same channel, same time, June 3rd is our next presentation. It will be with Larry Ruth, who many of us know. He's a retired attorney. He's going to talk about organ donation. He wants to talk about power of attorney for healthcare, power of attorney for finances. That doesn't have to be the same person.
Right.
He'll probably take some questions from the audience. So we'll have information in the newspaper and, of course, around Aldersgate and so forth and on our website. So I wanted to just put that plug in for June 3rd. Hope we see you then, and thank you so much for coming tonight. And we wish you a good evening. And Tom will give you one of the When I Die sheets before you go out.